Welcome back to Prophecy's Hammer. Today we're going to get the understanding of the characters and the structure of Revelation. And if you've been following along, you have a pretty good idea who the characters are already. We laid that out pretty good, but we're going to add some more clarity to that at the end here. But one thing I'd like to ask you to do is, if you've studied prophecy before, especially the book of Revelation, you're well aware that there's many interpretations of this book. So I'd ask you to take any prophecy understandings that you've had from the past and just put them aside for now, with the exception, of course, of what we've revealed in our previous videos, because obviously some of those beliefs are prevailing, some are not. But this is going to be a little bit different than what I've seen. Some will be similar, some will be different, but you're going to understand, as I promised, from chapter 12 right to the end of the book. Okay? That is a promise. I won't be able to give you every single line, but you will understand. You will see the timeline. You will see the structure. So today I'm going to give you the full structure of the book, and then we're going to zoom into some details that confirm that. And I don't expect you to fully believe it when you see those details, but they are confirming. But as we move forward, you're going to see everything line up. Okay, so today we're going to give you that structure, and then when we get to chapter 14, well, we're going to open it up more. So let's move forward. So here we go. Here's our structure right here. Here it is. So let's walk through it real quick. So chapter 1, as we know, John has instructions from our Holy King to write to the 7 churches, and that's pretty much what he writes in the first chapter. He's writing to the 7 churches, and then he does so here. All right, quite simple. And that'll be the theme if you've been following along. Simple is the word, and it's going to continue to be that way. So chapters 4 and 5, he's got visions in heaven. And it isn't until chapter 6, verse 2, that we actually get our first prophecy in this book. But let me give you the layout here. What we have is we have a 3-layered prophecy. 3 layers. These all happen concurrently over the same time span. Okay? So this is one layer of prophecy that goes from when John wrote the book up until, as we saw in our first video, next year. Okay? And this does the same. From this 8:6 to the end of chapter 11, we get the same time span. All right? And then from chapter 12 to 14, we get a third one. And the first one we see is the Lamb of God opens the 7 seals. And that completes itself, verse 8:5. And then 8:6, the angels prepare themselves to sound. 8:7, they start sounding. And that runs to the end of chapter 11. And then the beginning of chapter 12, it's John having visions. Okay, so we have 3 separate series of events. These have more of a cause and effect, but this is just John having visions. And when we get to chapter 14, that's when we're going to unlock the rest of this. And when we do that, we're going to see an overlay in the wording and language in all of these. And we'll reflect back to this group of prophecies as well. So what we have is, starting at chapter 15, is the actual wrath. There's no wrath before this chapter. There's no wrath at all. It just says his wrath has come, and it begins at chapter 15 and goes to 19. And then we have the 1,000-year kingdom, Satan's destroyed, and the judgment, and then the new heavens, new earth, and the new Jerusalem, right? The city with God's name. And that runs to 22:5, and then 22:6, we get closing statements. So let's look at why these 3 are a 3-layered set of prophecies. Okay, here we have the 3 layers, 1, 2, 3. And what do we have here? There was a great earthquake, the wrath of the Lamb, his wrath is come. Here we have thy wrath is come, right? At the end of this series, we get thy wrath is come. Then at 14:19, we have the great winepress of the wrath of God. And of course, during the wrath, we have, here they are, the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. There's nowhere in this book that the wrath happens. Nobody's given vials of any wrath anywhere. Right? And one of the 4 beasts gave to the 7 angels golden vials full of the wrath of God. There's no question the wrath is here. It's nowhere else. And so now let's look at these details. What do we have? Voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. There were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. There were voices and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake. There was a great earthquake. Exact same wording. The fierceness of his wrath. And there fell upon men a great hail. Great hail. Okay, I hope you can see how these are exactly the same events. On this one, we're going to go into. I'm not going to go into it now because it's a little bit. It's very interesting and really, I think it's awesome the way it unravels. So what we're going to see is how these 12:1 to 14:20 has an incredible overlap between 15 and 19. All those chapters. So let's now move forward and look at our characters. Okay? If you've seen the image of the beast, you know who these people are, but we're going to review it real quick because I want to highlight something very important that we need to see moving forward. All right? So the dragon we know is Rome. He gives power to the first empire, as we saw again in the image of the beast, which is the Holy Roman Empire, and the second beast is Washington, D.C., who is also the false prophet and the eighth beast. They're all the same character. And the first beast lost its power and yet lived. So it lost its empire and now is the whore, which of course is Rome, the Vatican at this time. But today we're going to add one more character. We're going to give you the good guy. The woman in chapter 12. All right? So, before we get into these characters fully, I want to give you the real enemy. All right? And again, we've seen this in the image of the beast, right? Those who created the second empire said to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast. And we saw who they were. Here they are right here, right? If you remember this, Maryland's classic department looks at connections between Rome and Washington. If you want to read this article, and there's several on the internet that reference this exact historical connection. But here we have, in this article, the founders of Washington wanted the representative democracy of the Roman Republic. That's what we have. We have the democracy of the Roman Republic. But they also thought that our capital should look like Rome. Okay, so these two, though they are one tied together, they are actually two separate entities, because here's the empire, right? And here's the image that represents it. But this is what the enemy is, the democracy. If we look at the world today and we see the mess, this is what brought us here. All right? So let's now decipher his prophecies. Let's look at that. And the good news is all of us are experts already. And I'm going to prove that to you in 1 second. We've been preparing this to understand the Lord's prophecies since our childhood. So, just like in the book of Revelation, we have symbolic wording, right? We saw 13:1, the beginning portion of it, translate itself, and we're going to look at that again in a moment, by symbolic language into real world things. You know, actually existing things. People, places, things like that. So, here's how you know you can understand it, because you understand all of these, don't you? And they're all symbols. They're symbolic of what they're trying to tell you. Right? And we saw that in the book of Revelation. We all know what these mean. We don't need the words. So let's look at the translation one more time. Here we are. Right? Here's our translation right here. We went from, and I stood upon the sands of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, to, as I stood over many multitudes of peoples and nations of many languages, I saw an empire rise up out of them. Very clear, very understandable. So how did we do that? In the image of the beast, we saw step by step. And here it is. Here's our cipher right here. Very clear, very visual, very simple. Here's what Revelation tells us. Here's the translation. And where did we get it? Right here. Daniel 7:17. So we took the beast and we converted it to an empire. And we use the word empire because this encompasses many kingdoms within it, which is exactly what's going on back then in Rome and today in Rome. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the Empire of States. Right? And here we have number 2, waters and sea. Number two, the sea. And we converted that to multitudes of people, nations of many languages. And we used them to refer back to that exact set of details. And we get that right here from the angel, Revelation 17:15. And these both come directly from heaven, right from an angel to the prophets. And of course, sand is a very large number. I don't think anyone's going to even pretend that it could be anything else. And here's a few, and there's many more references to that. So let's take this, okay? Let's take this and do the same thing with the characters. All right? Here we are. Here's our characters. So chapter 12, the woman in chapter 12 is Israel, and those who keep Yahweh's commandments, right? Those who love Yahweh always equal the bride. And we'll definitely nail this in chapter 12, because who's this guy chasing the whole time and trying to destroy? The woman. Right? So who else could it be? So the dragon, and it also says the serpent, Satan, as well in the same chapter. These are all referenced. I just used the dragon because we know who that is, and they're all tied together as well. But it also refers to Satan in the Roman Empire. Okay, so no matter what it says, if it's a Satan, the serpent, the dragon, in the context of the sentence, we can see what it means. Now, one thing we can verify is, how do we know that the dragon fooled the whole world and it was the Roman Empire? We'll look at that in this verse. If you want to go look yourself at the Greek, you'll see it. It's very specific. Okay, in the first beast, we have the Holy Roman Empire, right? Rome, the dragon, gave it seat and power and authority. So here we have the dragon's Rome. Gave him seat and power and authority, and history has shown us this. Then we have chapter 13, 16, and 17 with these three guys, and additional characters with these. We have the USA Empire, or the Roman democracy of Washington. And we've seen nearly every single aspect of this empire revealed to us in the image of the beast, and in the second beast has 2 horns and causes fire to come down from heaven. In those videos, we see nearly every aspect of this beast or this empire explained to us. All right, and then 17, we have the whore. All right, and here's where we get the translation. So let's take these characters and add them to our previous ciphers, and we'll add a couple of more. So here we go. All right, so here's our first 3. We've added these 3. We've had these explained to us. Here's where we get the translation of them, what they are. And then here's the woman. So I want you to take this. All right, take this and go into chapter 12 and start reading and deciphering all the way down to 20 if you wish. See if you can see what's going on before we get there. All right? With these two tools, you should be able to really unlock a whole lot in here. I don't expect you'll see the structure of this. This was puzzling, very puzzling. Chapter 19 especially. But we'll see that when we hit 14. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to start at chapter 12. We're going to go into chapter 13. And that's when I'll show you the detail I mentioned in chapter 4 of War with the Beast that confirms our characters are all the same. And something that I think would have cleared up the text for many people years before. I have not seen anyone point this out. It's a very simple detail. And then after we do that, we're just going to do a review of the second beast. Because like I just said, and if you go watch those videos, you'll see every aspect of that beast, with the exception of the number, is completely explained. And we'll walk through that so we can understand it as we look at the text. And that's going to be real. I mean, it's all going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to sharing this. And then once we hit here, which will be the third video from this one, we're going to unlock all this. I'm going to explain all of this to you. And then you will understand from 12 to the end. It'll be very clear, because once I point out what's going on in these chapters in relation to these, yeah, and again, just like we're looking at this layout here in front of us, it's very simple. As a child, the Lord sat a child in the middle of all of them and said, unless you're like one of these, you cannot enter the kingdom. Right? Well, does a child have masters and universities? No, of course not. So this is what we're looking at. So take these guys, all right? Take this and go into these chapters and pray to the Lord. And I hope He answers some things that I don't have answers to as we move along. And perhaps you can comment below and tell me what the Lord has shown you. All right? So I'll see you next time. And peace of Yah be with you.